This is the Growing Farms Podcast with John Siskovich, episode number 82.
Welcome to the Growing Farms Podcast, where farmers come together to talk shop. Whether you've been farming for years, you're a homegrown greenhorn, or you're starting to consider a career in agriculture, there is something we can all do to grow our farms.
Greetings, friends and farmers, and welcome to episode number 82 of the Growing Farms Podcast. Really excited to be here today. Been doing a bunch of stuff on farm that has me amped up, and I'm really happy to bring you this episode. It's really good. Coming on for the second time in a row is one Mr. Curtis Stone, the urban farmer. Some really good stuff that he's sharing with today's episode. Hope you enjoyed last episode. If this is your first time joining the podcast, then I recommend going back in time to the previous episode and listening to Curtis and I talk about how we got into farming. So I had so much fun talking about how I got into farming in the last episode. I want to spill it into this episode a little bit and give you some backstory on me under the umbrella of employee management. That's kind of the topic of today. Curtis and I talk about it a bunch in the interview coming up, and I wanted to touch on it now as I reflect back on this year and make my plans going forward. So a little backstory on me, not always in the farming and agricultural realm. I used to work in television. I was a gaffer or an electrician. I focused on lights for TV and theater. I have a bachelor's degree in design and technical theater with a concentration in scenic and lighting design. Got that from the University of Connecticut. Then I moved to New York City because that's where all the jobs were in theater and in TV when you live in the Northeast, kind of pretty much, at least in my area. So I went down to New York City, and off and on I worked for other people. I had people working for me, and being in a very specific realm of the world with a very niche down skill set, things ran at times usually pretty smooth because if you were working with a good crew, they knew what to do. And the best, most easy work days, at least the ones that were most enjoyable, were when either I did a good job of organizing the job or I worked for somebody who did a really good job of organizing whatever, design and setup we were doing that day. This one designer I worked with, Dave Feldman, always did a spectacular job of having everything labeled, having his now I can't think of the drafting and the design and the layout and the where all the lights go and what everything had to look like. Dave was always on point with running the crew, having things organized, having the questions answered ahead of time, and it allowed the workday to run smoothly and the crew very efficiently because when they needed something, they had it, they grabbed it, they used it, the job got done, everybody went home and had a beer, life was good. The days that were more difficult were the days that, you weren't working with somebody good or somebody who couldn't follow the instructions, or the instructions were written poorly, or there wasn't as much of a plan. And that usually wasn't the case because there was more money involved with this. So there was always someone to have a good handle on how things were happening. But yeah, those were the more stressful times that, things didn't run as smoothly. Tempers got a little higher. Things that had to be kind of made up on the fly sometimes didn't work out. And then there was a time crunch and a budget crunch, and things came to a head, and either you didn't work with these people again or, whatever the case may be, but it was not as a positive experience as when the whole thing was organized. So fast forward to today on my farm. The days that are most enjoyable are the days that have more of a plan, a structure, something that you can share with other people, especially if you're working with other people, that there's no decisions that, not a lot of decisions to be made that day because they've already been made up front. Supplies have been purchased, the tools are in order, and you're ready to go and get cooking out in the fields. And as now it's November and I'm taking stock of my year and how this year went, how last year went, the year before that, and I'm reading this book, The Lean Farm by Ben Hartman. Holy crap! I'm in love with this book. As of this podcast recording, I'm on page 126. I'm reading it slowly, slower than normal, because there's things I've been trying to do on farm to get more organized and be more structured and have things where I can hand it off to somebody. Here's a tool, you'll know where to put it back because it has a designated place. I didn't have that, but I've been working towards it. But without the lean principles, without the leaning that is detailed in this book, I just seemed like a micromanager. I didn't pull it off really well, and I didn't have the details of how something like this could be pulled off on a farm. Now I'm going through this book like, oh, this solves that problem, that solves that problem. And, this thing that I didn't like about this person could have been solved with my better management practices as I continue to do my research. I'm very hard on myself. I always want to improve, become better, be a better manager, be a better farmer, a better husband, a better father. It's a lot of pressure at times. And this organization and management and the principles that we'll detail out in some of this, later in this episode, and in The Lean Farm, again, by Ben Hartman. I'll plug this guy's book all day long because it is so good. I mean, there's a few farming books in my life that have really just kind of crashed on me, and, it's washed over me and made such a huge difference. There's the Holistic Management book. There's Elliot Coleman's books, and then The Lean Farm by Ben Hartman. Also John Martin's book, The Market Gardener. Anyways, all plugs aside, I'm going through the farm now and organizing things and thinking about all the steps in the process for everything that I produce on farm to make it more efficient, make it more organized. My boss, who I work with here on farm, had even asked me, tasks that we do all the time. It's a good practice to have a run book, and a run book is something you can hand to somebody and they can, hopefully complete that task. And Ben makes that a little bit more simple and effective in his book. So one of those simple and effective things that I'm doing on farm is cleaning up the tool shed. Sounds mundane. It's not really what, the top of the list of things that really want to do, but man, has it made a difference. I know where everything is now. I know what's missing. I know where to put things away. I can tell somebody else where to put things away. I have sections for tools. It's very organized. There's a flow to it. There's a lot of thought that's going into the design of this workspace, and I'll be translating that to other areas of the farm as well. So now if I'm working, just by myself, I always know where everything is. I can work more efficiently. And if I'm working with somebody else, I know if they've taken the tool, if they've put the tool back, and I can tell them if I need something, they can go get it and exactly where it is because it has a designated spot. It's great. Makes those days a lot more efficient. And then having that infrastructure in place of the organized shop, the organized washing room, the organized tool shed, whatever it is, you can then more clearly create those run books to say, oh, when you want to do this task, you need to do A, then B, then C, and that person will know where all of those things are located versus having no plan and pointing to a couple piles of stuff and being like, oh, grab something from there and kind of something from there and, make that work. If you have a Star Stellar employee, that might work, but if you don't, then you're in trouble. And you have to be very careful that you don't take your frustrations at things going inefficiently out on your employees, because it's then a management problem, not an employee problem. So that's really, it's really got to be my focus this winter, is to go through all of these things, clear out any of the garbage, do the recycling, organize it, and set it up in a way that things run more efficiently, where I'm not solely focused on increasing my gross profit, because you can produce a lot and spend a lot to get there. Where if you're keeping a relative same gross, but you're increasing your net margins, you're actually becoming more efficient, and you are earning more money because you have more take home because you've reduced your cost of goods sold and your overhead. And you're making more money, which means you're working more efficiently. You don't have to work as many hours. The 90-hour work week, while it's a badge of honor, it's not sustainable, and it's pretty, there's no point to doing it. Working efficiently and effectively, way better and way less stressful than putting in those 90-hour work weeks just because you're working inefficiently. I want to get to the point where, I'm working reasonable hours, pulling in reasonable money, the farm's really running effectively, and everybody's happy, or at least, working cohesively. Anyways, I think it's time, without any more babbling, to get into the interview with Curtis Stone. If you haven't already, go back and listen to episode 81. If not, enjoy this interview. I'll be back at the end for a few notes, and we'll wrap up the show. Then that's that. So you heard last episode, we talked with Curtis Stone of Green City Acres, and I got him on the phone again to talk about how he does it. How you doing today, Curtis?
Good.
It's good to have you back on the show. 2 weeks has passed since the last episode has aired. And a quick recap, Curtis is an urban farmer in Canada. He's kicking some butt, and I highly recommend listening to the last episode if this is your first time listening to the podcast. So Curtis, let's jump right into it. You're farming on 1/3 of an acre, and you've got a lot to manage. I would like in this episode to talk about some of the technology you use, some of the spreadsheets you use. How do you keep it all sane?
So it's a combination of things. I use spreadsheets. I'm a Mac user, so I use numbers, but anybody else could do this in Excel. And I use my smartphone. I tell people that my smartphone is the number one tool I use on my farm. And I use some accounting software, which is just like QuickBooks, basically to handle my invoicing for my restaurant customers and tracking who owes me money and whatnot and who's paid. But most of my work is in my spreadsheets, and I use actually cover spreadsheets in my book quite extensively. I have a whole chapter on it, and I also have digital downloads. So when people buy my book, they can go on my website and they'll be able to download some of those spreadsheets specifically. In fact, my book might be labeled at some point as the dorkiest farm book ever written, because it is. I wanted to do something that nobody had done before as far as contributing to intensive organic agriculture, and I really wanted to get into the data management because I see it's something that a lot of people fail on. And when I met you down at PV2 last year, we were just dorking out over this information, and I was like so surprised actually at this conference, and then just over the last year, because I met so many people there and have connected with so many other people since then, on how many people actually are really interested in this stuff.
Oh, so yeah, totally.
I'm very excited about that, because I kind of thought I was just the really dorky guy using this kind of stuff. But I've found that it is probably one of the most critical things that has been to my success in farming. And so I could break down for you really quickly how I use spreadsheets and the types of spreadsheets I use. So basically I have one spreadsheet document. I just label it by my growing season. So I've got my 2015 growing season. In that, there's a number of spreadsheets in there, but the one I use the most is my market plan. And it's broken down. And again, this will be all in my book.
Curtis, even before we get into the specific spreadsheets, one of the problems that I faced going into farming and starting to run my own farm and track all this stuff was just a fear of spreadsheets. There's a lot of blocks, and they do stuff, and there's people I know who are more skilled at me at doing it. How do you, if you go to sit down and solve a problem with a spreadsheet, just kind of a basic overview of what goes through your head. I mean, there's no accounting for genetics and just being a geek. And it's something I can't teach somebody, but making this data management and collection approachable, because when you say things like data management, you're like, ooh, that sounds very official. But at the end of the day, you're just, you could have a notebook or a napkin and write all this stuff down. You're just doing it on an internet napkin.
Well, and that's essentially what it is, because I wasn't into this stuff in school. Like I was a musician who just smoked lots of weed.
Yeah.
When I was in school, like I didn't do any of this stuff. I got into it just because I saw a practical use for it, and I figured out. I'm still not a great spreadsheet user. Like I can't do advanced calculations and make one spreadsheet connect to the other. I don't do anything like that. I just use them in a very practical way of harvesting data and then sorting that data. So, in one of my spreadsheets, the main spreadsheet I use is called my market plan. And in it, I have 3 sheets. that are all in one view. I have a previous sales for the week, and then I have a harvest tally that tracks what I need to harvest. And so as I get orders from restaurants or what I'm bringing to the market, they go in my orders for the week, and then I can sort that sheet by items or customer. And then that way I can figure out, okay, once I have all my orders, I can sort this by items and go, boom, there's everything in alphabetical order. There's all my arugula. There's all my braising mix. There's all my carrots, so on and so forth. And then I can easily put that data into a harvest tally sheet that I print up and put on a clipboard and we take into the field with us. So that's a really simple way that we do it. In that harvest tally, I've got what I have in the cooler. So I'll go and take stock because I might have already had some crops already harvested. So I know what I need. I'll go into my cooler, look at what I've got in stock, subtract the difference, and that's what I need to harvest. So that's my most common spreadsheet that I'm using constantly. And then, without getting into too much more detail before you have another question, is the other things are like tracking my plantings. So what goes in the field? What was planted in the nursery? Where did that crop get planted? When was it planted? When did it germinate? When did it emerge? When was it harvested? And then I track my yields. And that's probably the other really important spreadsheet. There's many others, but we don't need to go down that rabbit hole because it's probably too much for us to cover in the show.
Yeah, we might lose a few people.
Exactly.
On that.
So the main things I'm tracking is my market plan, like what I'm bringing and selling, my plantings, what goes in the field, and my yields, what comes off the field. And then there's correlations between planting and yields. And that's really what I track to pick the winners and the losers each season, because there's always winners and losers. I'm looking at crop yields overall the season, and I'm looking at what crops yielded what. And I can see, oh, wow, this new variety consistently didn't yield a number that I like. And then I'll ditch that crop and I'll try something else. Constantly in a state of R&D and trying new crops and new techniques.
Well, an amazing thing there is that you can see whether that crop has yielded or not with an actual number on a concrete thing. You don't feel like this did that well or feel like this did really well. By a number, oh no, I have data. This crop did great. This crop I didn't realize was doing as well as it is, but look how much of our sales it's accounting for. And you have that because it's in front of you. Absolutely.
And one of my first farming mentors was a man named John Alcock, who's a seed grower here, an organic seed grower. And the thing he said to me, one of the most important pieces of advice I ever got in my life, especially at that time, is he says, keep a journal on you all the time and track everything. And John is old school, like, he's in his late 60s or early 70s, old school farmer, and had a journal. But the technology is upgraded since the paper journal, and I did have a paper journal my first year. And looking at that journal over the winter, when you go into your reflection phase of your season, was a nightmare because my handwriting's messy. Often my hands were dirty.
It gets covered in dirt. It rains. Your ink runs.
It's incomprehensible. And I spent more time flipping through it to find what I said about one thing than the usefulness of that journal itself. So spreadsheets are just a far better way to track information because you can sort it, and you can look at averages, and you can use it to speculate. And that's the one thing that I find the most useful, especially when it comes to my market plans, is when I'm recording my sales, I dump the overview of all my weekly sales into another sheet that I call weekly totals. And it's basically, and this is in my book too, it just tracks each week of the season. What was the total amount we made this week? What do we sell at the farmer's market? And I'll have total, market, plus my restaurant and distributor sales all in one thing. And as I make a new sheet for the next year, I cut and paste just the overview of my previous season. So when I look at this, I can go, okay, this July 6th this year, we did X amount. Okay, last year we did this. The year before that we did this. And I can look at trends. And I find that's really crucial because I can see where my high points in the seasons are. And those are based on a variety of different things. It could be tourism. It could be new restaurants opening up. It could be a festival. It could be all kinds of different things that would affect the market at that period. But it's all about looking at trends and speculating from that, because I always set out my entire season now. This is what I do. If I say I want to achieve $100,000 this season, what does that look like on the weekly breakdown? And so I can just, okay, let's say on average, that's, say that's $3,000 a week for my season or something like that. I can break it down where it'd be like, okay, well, in the summertime, in my 8 weeks of the high season, it's more like 4,000 a week. In the springtime, like from May until April, it's like 1,200, 1,500, 1,800 is growing from there, and then it starts to taper down in October. I will actually go and set that as a frame. I will plug in all of those numbers preliminary as a speculative goal. Like, this is what we need to make this week to achieve this total number. And as we go through the season, we work towards those goals and most often exceed them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So backing up just a little bit, I really love the crunching of numbers, which is really Scott's area of, he just has a perverse interest in data crunching. My interest is in human behavioral psychology. I really love how people function, how they act, and I study that not only to adjust, my sales copy, but also how I present information online. One of the things as I, adjust my own habits to become a better and more efficient farmer, I'm trying to constantly improve, is figuring out, all right, Curtis talked all about setting up these spreadsheets in those time in the winter when you have that reflection time to sit down and crunch the numbers. You also briefly touched on it with having that physical notebook. What does it look like for you when you're planting a seed or you're recording something? Mm-hmm. Does that go into your phone and that phone goes into a cloud-based system?
Exactly. So I'm a Mac user. I use the notes on Evernote works for this too. Actually, I've just started to kind of get into Evernote again, but mostly I just use the Mac Notes program, and it's synced to my computer in a cloud. So I use Siri on my phone, and so I have a note on my phone called Field Sheet, and so it's notes of anything that happens in the field. So I usually do in my main season, I'm prepping beds and planting every Monday and Tuesday, as well as a variety of other tasks. But that's the main thing that happens on those days. So when I go to a certain plot, I just speak into my phone in my field sheet. Segment 1, beds 4 and 6 were arugula planted at 9 rows or whatever. Sometimes I don't need to record that specific because I just standard. I plant my beds. Arugula beds are all the same. Spinach beds are all the same. So I'll just say these beds and these beds at this date. So I methodically, in my calendar, on my computer and on my phone, I get an alert every Tuesday and Friday at, what do I do, at 4 o'clock. I actually include this in my work time now, whereas I used to just do it after work. But now I actually put this in my work time because I have people working with me now, is 4 o'clock. I spend a half an hour inputting data. Do it every single week, and it takes half hour, not sometimes not even a half an hour. But I just go in, I open up my notes on my computer, they're all synced from my phone, and I just go into my spreadsheets and plug them in. It's that simple. And I do the same thing with yields. So when we're in the field and we have multiple locations, so we go and harvest out a plot, we bring a scale with us. And so I'll harvest a bed of spinach, and I have masking tape and a marker with me. I'll mark the tote, what the weight was. I'll throw that on the scale. I'll do all that after the total harvest, and I'll just speak that into my phone, or I'll write it on my harvest tally sheet, whatever it is, and then I just plug that into the computer later on in that day.
Yeah, as long as it's something that can go back to that data entry point, like writing a sheet in the field. We have clipboards on farm all over the farm for tracking eggs, for tracking feed for the livestock. We have them in the greenhouse for how often things get watered or seeded.
Exactly. Yep.
And then taking those spreadsheets, and we have it on our calendar it depends on what it is, but for feed and eggs, it's once a month where we take the sheets in. We can enter that information and, depending on what it is, adjust from there. But you really hit on it there with putting it on your calendar and making time for it. It's great to talk about systems, and I'm reading now this book about lean farming and setting up systems on your farm. That book's amazing.
I think that's out on New Society. That's the same. I think that's the same publishing house as. Is it called The Lean Farm?
Yeah, it is. It's great. Talking about these systems and setting things up. But if you don't have the discipline to do it, it means nothing. then you've wasted a bunch of time either researching or creating these spreadsheets. And, you're sitting at home in the winter creating like, this is what my year is going to look like, and I'm going to use these spreadsheets. But once you get in the thick of it, it's easy to get your hands dirty and be like, well, I can't log that information because I really need to weed that because I have to then go pick up the kids from soccer practice or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And, that's the stuff that's easy to push by the wayside because it looks and feels really good to weed a bed of something. But if you don't have that information later to help make educated decisions in your business, then you'll keep weeding until you burn out.
Exactly.
And you won't know how you got to that burnout.
Well, and that's the thing that what I really focus on is, well, for one, just in regards of weeding, I'll just touch on that a little bit, is focusing on the tasks that pay. Planting, harvesting, marketing. Those tasks have a measurable outcome, and that's what I focus on. Anything that doesn't have a measurable outcome, like weeding, I try to eliminate that task through time, technology, and technique. I call it the 3 T's. So using passive techniques, like tarps are a big one. Or
I just put up a YouTube video where I found out through you and JM, I got JM's book and stale seed bedding. Doing experiments with that on my farm because
huge.
I hate weeding. I hate weeding too.
I know, and so all those things need to be eliminated or minimized. They can't be eliminated, but you can minimize them considerably. And as far as how it relates to data recording, is my advice to anybody who wants to get into data recording on their farm is book time for it during your work day. Don't get into the habit of doing this in your off day. Try to set it up where you're done farming, whatever your day is. Like mine is essentially 9 to 5. In the summer, it's like 6 to 2, or whatever it is to work around the hot days or the cold nights or whatever it could be. But book it in your day. And sometimes that's hard to do if you're just starting, especially if you're starting alone. But it's really important to treat it just as any other farm task. Harvesting data is the same as harvesting carrots. It's just as important. It might not have as much of a measurable outcome as harvesting the carrots does, but when you look at your overall, when you pull the lens back a little bit and take a more of a macro view, that data is so valuable for you to fine-tune your operation. And that's really what it gives you the ability to double down on the things that work. Because if you don't know where you've been, you have no idea where you're going. And so it's all about having a clear view of all of these systems, what works, what doesn't, and then using the things that work and doubling down on them.
And that's really not something anybody else can give to you. That's something you have to give to yourself.
Yeah, and you have to book in the time to do it and discipline yourself to do it. And, like, to be honest, there are weeks that I miss it. But especially for I always get my plantings. I always record my marketing information, bar none. That I never miss that. There are times where I do miss harvesting my yield information, and that's okay to some degree because as long as you have a good idea of what you harvested off the field, if your marketing information will ultimately tell you what you sold from the farm, and then that will ultimately tell you what you produced. There's going to be a little bit of a discrepancy in the sense that you might have some spoilage. So that's where there's going to be a slight difference between that information and your yield information. But your yield information is incredibly important when you're starting because that's when it's the most important time to find out what works and what doesn't and ditch what doesn't work very fast. If you want to be profitable on a farm within your first year or two, then you need to really discipline yourself to record that information.
So I'm gonna drop in a little bit of introspective, touchy-feely stuff. We'll go bring it all the way back to the last episode you were on and tie it into what we're talking about right now. So in the last episode, you talked about how you went on this bike trip and this was big journey of self-discovery. And I can tell through talking to you that you're very aware of how you function, what your limits are, what your strengths are, and then capitalizing on them, not just on farm, but even personally. And one of the big things that I learned about my own behavior is figuring out when I'm just making this term, but creative cycles are during the day or when you're most effective at doing certain tasks.
Yes.
And how that ties into what we were talking about just now is that there's certain times a day where you'll have the mental energy to data crunch and look at your numbers and enter this stuff in. And there's certain times a day where you need to turn your brain off and just weed. And as you're scheduling those tasks, taking into account, and this is something that even if you don't have a farm, this applies to your life right now, that if you're most creative in the morning, do your marketing then, because you're going to love what you're doing. You're going to love to talk about it. You're going to create a new image or a video or snap a picture and put it up on Facebook. If there's a time of day where, you know, in the afternoon at 2 p.m., after I've had a late lunch, my brain is just a ball of mush at that point. And I go out and I'll weed or I mow or I do something where I don't have to delegate to anybody. I don't have to think anything other than pull that plant, not that plant. You know, I get questions a lot from people wanting to start a farm. John, I want to start a farm. Where do I start? This is one of those areas. Figuring out who you are as a person and how you function. And then as you learn about these things from Curtis Stone in his new book about spreadsheets, you know, all right, if I'm going to do spreadsheets, this is my time of day and my time of week when I don't have the kids or when I don't have this responsibility and I have this time open. I'm going to do it then because I'll get it done quicker.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the same approach in the farm as it is in life. It's doubling down on the things you're good at, finding out what those are, and finding your time for that. And I'm with you on that one. The morning is my most creative time. That's when I work on marketing. I do my fresh sheet every morning. That's when that goes out. That takes some creative thought processes, and that's also the time that I do my sort of plan for the week. Like what's going in the field, what is going to be harvested, where's that coming from? There's a lot of logistics to coordinate on a multi-locational urban farm. So I really need to be structured in my planning, and I need to have time to do that. And so that's why it's important to figure out where you work in all of those things. And it's the same for delegating to a staff too, is figuring out with your crew who does what well and who enjoys what, and give them those tasks. Focus on people's strengths, not their weaknesses. And that will create a far better work experience for everybody else and a more enjoyable place of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with working with other staff, just at the base of it, doing all this planning and record keeping and strategizing for your farm is really critical if you're farming by yourself to keep yourself sane. You almost can't. I'm always very careful about how I phrase things. I would personally have a very difficult time and have experienced now a very difficult time working with crew underneath me if I'm not insanely organized. I always notice the weeks that I have the harvest list done and I have people's hours for the week all set up and I've created now a structure specific to my farm are the smoothest weeks and the most enjoyable over the summer. And it's the weeks where I'm like, oh, you know, it's a flex week. We'll kind of wing it. And you do this and this kind of needs to get done. That's where on Thursday and Friday, preparing for the weekend, I'm running like a madman because, we forgot to do this and, this didn't get done well enough and, this person slacked off on this. And had I just laid it out ahead of time, I would have saved myself so many hours and so much aggravation.
Huge value in that. Exactly the same for me. If you aren't organized with people, you fail for yourself because you end up costing yourself more money because you end up wasting expenses on unnecessary labor, and you make a sort of undirected, misguided experience for people that are working with you. Because I don't know what it's like on your farm, but people that come to work for me are working to learn. I'm trying to give a couple people a really, really good job that they can look forward to and make a good living at, but also teach them some very valuable skills, because nobody's going to work for you forever, right? They're eventually going to move on into someone else, especially if they're somewhat entrepreneurial. And those are the kind of people that I'm generally attracted to, or that I want to have working for me, are people that really understand the hustle. Because people that come forward and they're like, I want this wage and this and this and this, it's like, well, you know, what are you going to do for me? What kind of value are you bringing to the table? I'm more interested in people that are looking at the long term and going, I want to learn from you. I want to build some skills for myself. And I love to keep those people around as long as possible. But with those kind of people, eventually they're going to become entrepreneurs and do their own thing. And so it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because you want to have a great employee, but usually the best employees will eventually leave to do their own thing. Whereas on the other hand, the person who's totally content with just working a $12 or $15 an hour job for the rest of their life, they won't have that same kind of drive and hustle as somebody that is sort of a natural entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, and even, the data crunching applies to employees in a big way. And aside from how much you pay them and how efficiently they work, even the personal stuff of managing people and people's whims, when someone does something on farm that you don't like, there's a potential that there's a flaw in your system. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily in that person. And as you manage and either succeed or fail through people, keeping a note sheet that when you're in your office just venting about how, quote, horrible this one employee is, well, what are they doing that's bothering you? How can you adjust what you do? And then write that down and create an employee manual.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say that when you hire somebody, you can hand it to them and say, this is an overview of what you can expect. Please sign off on it. And then you go over it together and they're set up for the system. And through the years, you'll adjust that employee manual. And just like learning your crops, you'll learn how to manage people better through that information tracking.
Exactly. I'm learning a lot from you here. I like that idea. What we do is we have a Google Doc for each person who works on the farm, and they record their hours in there, and then they also have a summary of what they did in the day. And so I find it very useful, especially now as we're kind of wrapping up for the main season and we're getting ready for winter production. I can look back and go, wow, look at all the tasks that we did. And it's cool because when we're tracking hours in there, and I can break down how long certain tasks take. And so, I can adjust my expectations. I can plan better with that information and make better use of that person, and also just give them a better, more directed experience, which I think is really important for learning in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just like everything else, playing to their strengths, learning who they are, and adjusting how you function as a team. I've even gone so far, and this is revealing something, I've had a number of different employees over the last couple of years, some really great, some less than great, or things got tense over the season. So I did a lot of research, because I always bring it back to me. I have this Catholic guilt, but everything I do kind of makes me feel guilty on some degree. So it's got to be, it couldn't be them. It's got to be some flaw in me. So extensive research on business management, how corporate finance or corporate HR structure works, and down to small business structure, and found some good podcasts on it. Oh, it was obnoxious. But one of the things when you have employees with the data tracking is having, when I hire somebody, I start just a Google Doc that's private to me. And when they do something really astounding, I'll throw it in the Google Doc. When they do something that really pisses me off, I'll throw it in. And you have this pro column and a con column. And if it comes time to have a review or give them a raise, or if you can see that pro column is really piling up with things on how this person's really kicking butt, you can more easily to yourself justify a raise. Or if it comes time to fire that person towards the end of the season or halfway through, you can say, listen, guy, you were late on this many days. I overpaid you because you were late, or I'm just making this up now. Or, you never put the tools away, or, a customer saw you peeing behind the shed or whatever. You have that information to then make educated decisions. So all of this information tracking, not just for lettuce and chickens, but for employees or even yourself as well.
Absolutely. That's solid gold. And the thing there too is, I really like what you said about tracking the pros. I try to focus on the cons. People don't last very long with me if they're lazy, or I don't tolerate that at all. If you're not going to give it your all the time, I've got hundreds of people waiting in line. So I haven't really had to track the cons because I don't
Yeah, it doesn't. You don't let it build.
This is a voluntary dictatorship, right? Like, this is my show, and you're going to do it this way. And if you don't like that, then go somewhere else. You know, that's your problem, not mine. So I like the idea of what you said about tracking the pros, though, is that you know, focusing on what people do well and using that to justify a raise, and also then looking in at the year end and say, okay, you did all these things. That's great. I want to pay you more, but in order to justify paying you more, how about we look at you taking on these responsibilities, and then what does that look like for you, and then opening that discussion? Because I think, you know, in order to justify paying somebody more, it's got to be economically viable to you, right? Like, we're not just hiring people to create jobs out of the goodwill of our heart
and have it feel good, you know.
Maybe some people are, you know, if you're Bernie Sanders, maybe that's what you do. But I'm hiring people to help grow my farm and make more of a profit. But I'm also doing it to work with good people and create a good job for them. But I'm not. This isn't a charity. This is a business. So, you know, it's all about, the more you understand about what that person can do and what they've done for you, then you can look at that and then leverage. Okay, let's take a look at this kind of stuff now. And so that's where I'm at now with training some other the folks that work with me, is getting them into the office stuff. Is okay, now you've got the field stuff dialed. Now we're going to get you in the office. You're going to print invoices. You're going to record information. You're going to follow the planting schedule and look in the field, because our planting schedule is dynamic. I don't make a static farm plan and follow that verbatim. We have a dynamic plan that changes. And so trying to integrate people into those, unless you have systems, you can't even fathom getting those things done by other people.
Yeah, that's the other, you know, you'll get into, as soon as you're not a farm of one, you're a farm of two or more, you'll start to simplify all of your systems, because you realize, oh, getting onto the tractor and like jiggling the handle and fixing the hood and then spinning in circles 3 times to get it to start just isn't going to cut it anymore, because someone else isn't going to want to do that. In the same way, someone's not going to want to just navigate your weird folder hierarchy on Google Drive or, you know, the Mac sheets that you use. You know, you have to simplify it where anybody can find it. You know, even with some training, it still has to be relatively simple, and that will make you a more efficient person, just trying to convey what's in your sloppy brain to another human who can't be in your subconscious 24 hours a day.
Absolutely. It's the only way to grow a business, is to have the things that you do be replicated by others. It's the only way to grow. And the team is so crucial, and I'm all about building a strong team of people that want to be here and enjoy the work and are good at it. And yeah, you can't do it without those systems.
So Curtis, you've mentioned several times you write a book, you got this online course. Give us, you know, what's going on? You got a lot going on. Give us a little bit of information, a little bit about the course. We're getting towards the end of the episode, and I love all the stuff you're doing, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. The course is basically, you know, I have these. I'm a very ideological person. I look at the world and I go, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And I often disappoint myself because I have all these crazy expectations. But I imagine, how cool would it be if in every suburban and urban neighborhood in the U.S. and Canada there was at least one urban farmer doing this? And I have a vision that I think we can have a major impact on the food system if we can have for me, it's all about decentralization of the food system. Because urban farmers, by their nature, will educate people in their neighborhood because people will see what they're doing. And so this course is designed to do exactly that. I want to give people all the tools they need to start farming right now. And we have a quick start guide that takes people through. It's like, okay, you don't want to go through all the main bulk of the course. What can you do now to get started? So we built this course to do exactly that, is to arm a revolution of people to start doing this and be successful right away. Forget the trial and error. These are the things that work. Go with these. And so it's a very, very detailed course. Like, my book covers a lot of this stuff, but my book doesn't have videos and extensive functioning spreadsheets and interviews and all this multimedia information, because the course isn't limited by pages like a book is. So people can get both. They get the book and the course, but the course, it's not cheap.
It's really tough to print videos.
Well, so. Exactly. And so, we've kind of set our course at a price point. It's close to $1,000. You have access to it forever, though, where it's almost like taking the separating the wheat from the chaff. Is if you're going to spend $10,000 on starting a farm, spending $1,000 on sourcing the highest grade information to get you equipped with all the tools and knowledge you need to be successful in your first year isn't really that big of an expense, really.
No, how much is a year of college?
Well, that's it. How much is a university, and what does that do for you these days? Not much.
Yeah.
But also, a year of trial and error will cost you far more than $1,000. It could cost you $10,000. So that's the way we priced it to think about the value that it offers. It also took us 2 years to make this thing and a lot of our own money, but. We want to train people to get out there and crush it like immediately. That's the whole purpose of the course.
And one of the clarifications that I wanted to make, and you've talked about this with Diego, is that you're not selling the idea of you work as an accountant. I always pick on accountants. I'm sorry, accountants out there. You're not selling the idea that if you're working as an accountant, you can quit your job tomorrow, start a farm, and support your family and the lifestyle that you have with that accountant job and pay. Nor are you getting right out of high school and starting this job and you can buy a house and a car and have a family with, this farming income. You're selling the idea. You have one of the guys who went through your course started it on the side and was either giving out the produce. You'll have to tell the story. But was learning alongside his day job at not that third of an acre scale, but learning the principles, setting up the spreadsheets for, it could be a 8-foot by 10-foot bed or whatever, garden bed you can fit in your backyard.
Exactly.
But learning the principles and having the discipline so that if it comes time to make that decision, or if you can grow your market up to the point where you can make that decision and quit and become full-time, you've set up the foundational building blocks with this stuff, not just jumping in full bore. I'm going to make $100,000 my first year of farming.
Exactly. And that's the most ideal scenario for, I think, most people is transition. And the challenge with transition, and the reason that I didn't transition from my previous job, was that I found it hard to learn because I'm a bit ADD. I need to really be immersed to keep my attention. And but I understand that most people don't have that. So this course is built so that you can do that, because we're going to show you how to do every single task on the farm, so you don't have to go through the trial and error. So if you want to keep your day job, say you work 40 hours a week at who knows what, can you scale it back to 30? And then we have a way that you can do that. You can scale it back to 30, work 10 hours a week on the farm, farm 2,000 square feet, and then go from there and transition, and then next year go on full time, so that you save. You do gain some experience. You build some social capital in your area. You build customer rapport, and you get some experience. Meanwhile, without having to go through all that tough trial and error.
Yeah, is that why it's tough? TUF, the urban farmer. Sorry. Anyways, so let's spout out some links. Where can I go to find more information about Green City Acres and all the stuff that you have going on?
Okay, so I'll my book is profitableurbanfarming.co, theurbanfarmer.co. My online course is profitableurbanfarming.com. My farm is greencityacres.com. And you can find, if you Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Green City Acres, and Facebook, we have profitableurbanfarming.com and Green City Acres on there as well.
Perfect, man. So you know what? I didn't do this in the last episode, but luckily enough, I got you for episode 2. There's one question that I ask every guest on the show. No one has been able to escape it yet. You got to escape it for one episode because I'm a bit of a putz. But that is, what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
Don't take on too much. Start small. Don't. To me, the world of agriculture, there's never been more opportunities it seems like there's so many opportunities right now because of the fact that the majority of farmers are aging and people perceive land access as a problem. I don't see that as a problem once you understand leases and how you can farm on land you don't need to own. Once you can get over those things, all of a sudden there's tons of opportunities. And because there's so few farmers in the world, less than 2% of people know how to farm anymore. When people know that there's a farmer in the neighborhood or the area, you're going to have land offers thrown at you like crazy. So the key is to say no to, or just not say yes to everything. Start small. If you've never farmed before and you're looking to do quick growing annuals like we do, a quarter acre is max. Even 5,000 square feet is enough to start with to get some production going and even build some customers. But so it's not to take on too much. Start lean, start small, keep your overhead low, focus on learning more so than earning.
Oh, that was great. Beautiful soundbite at the end there. Curtis, thank you for coming on the episode twice now, or the podcast twice now. Appreciate the information, and I look forward to keeping touch in the future.
My pleasure, John.
So that's it for episode number 82 of the Growing Farms podcast. And I actually have to make this ending short for some reason. And if there's any psychologists out there or any person ever, some doctor, why do I not have to cough and when I not have an itchy throat when I do anything else during the day, the entire other 23 hours of the day? But when I'm recording the podcast, my throat instantly becomes itchy, scratchy, and it's tough. You can hear me coughing sometimes behind the microphone. So I got to wrap it up. I want to thank Curtis again for coming on the show. Awesome information. He's one of those guys that I feel like if you hung out with him in person, it would be very hard to keep up with him because he's just going. And he's felt that and discovered in his life that he found farming as a second career, is really good at it. And then since he has that perspective of coming into farming, struggling to make it succeed and now finding some success, there's that calling to pay it forward, be a mentor, share that information. There's a ton of free information that he's put out there, especially him and Diego with the Urban Farmer podcast on Permaculture Voices, that I think a paid course is an amazing idea because he's put 2 years worth of work and everything else. You can totally hear he feels a little guilty. It's like being a farmer. All I want to do is grow food and give it to people. I hate the money exchange. I don't like QuickBooks. But it's a necessary evil in order, it's a tool to keep moving forward. And he feels a little bit guilty. This is me speculating now about charging for it. And there's some justification there, but no, he put a lot of work in. I feel from having reviewed, from what I could tell with this course, that it's great. I know Curtis, he's a good guy. And I completely endorse him. So that's it for the episode. Working towards simplicity on my farm, working towards being more organized. I'm going to talk about it in my YouTube videos coming up in the winter. I'm going to talk about it more on the podcast. I'll see if I can get this guy, Ben Hartman, on the show because that dude's amazing. I just love this book. So we'll see what happens. For now, if you're missing me during the week, head on over to YouTube, youtube.com/farm marketing. I'm doing a grazing series right now. That's right, cattle grazing. It's awesome. We're in the beginner kind of 101 stages where we're teaching you how to measure forage, use a grazing stick, where to find resources, and we're just starting the conversations to see what kind of questions you guys have. But it's me teaming up with the grass whisperer, Troy Bishop Family Farms. Troy really knows his grass, and to see his pastures up close and in person, I even ate some, really amazing. And that comes through in the information that he shares on the videos. Plus, there's an Easter egg at the end of every single video. We put in some kind of outtake or goofiness just because we had a lot of fun doing it. So even if you want to just see us look like fools, head on over to YouTube and check it out. So talking about a lot of work, a lot of things going on in the fall. There's always something to do. And this lean book, we're leaning the farm, Camps Road Farm, in 2016. It's starting right now. I got to get to the end of this book first because it's just so good. So we're leaning the farm, working towards a more simple, efficient farm for a very specific reason. I want more time off. I don't want to work as hard. I want to work more effectively and less hard. And it brought me to a quote, and I laughed out loud when I heard this from David Dunham. And he says, efficiency is intelligent laziness. I'm going to end on that. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can head on over to farmmarketingsolutions.com/82 for the show notes. And until next time, I will see you out in the field.
Thank you for listening to the Growing Farms podcast, brought to you by Farm Marketing Solutions at www.farmmarketingsolutions.com.